15-year-old Julian Gunther Reynoso was burned in a car crash when he was 9 years old. Today, he's catching up with two friends from the burn community who've supported him in his journey back to health.
I've done 4 major performances throughout the school year, and I messed them all up.
What?
At least one.
Cindy Rudder was burned in a house fire when she was 6. At 72, she works as a therapist and advocate for people with burn injury.
But you've only been playing a year.
Yeah.
So you got to
I
give
mean, it makes
yourself a
sense.
little
Yeah.
And Alexi Piles was burned as an infant of 6 months. At 29, she's a psychologist working with children who have burn injuries. And she's also training to do stunt work in movies.
So here, I'll show you. This is one of the fun ones I did the other
Oh,
day.
okay.
Alexi and Cindy both dealt with the challenges of returning to school after a severe burn, the anxiety and the bullying and more. But things are changing for kids like Julian.
I think it's important to make children feel comfortable and welcome when they return to school because they are still who they were. We live in such a look-oriented society that to help them reintegrate, to me, is crucial. Yes, you look physically different, but you can do this, and you can be whoever you want to be.
Julian is only a freshman, but he's lead drummer for his band class at Francisco Bravo Medical Magnet High School in Los Angeles.
I like playing drums because it's like a complicated but simple instrument. When you're playing drums, you kind of have to have like 4 brains working at the same time.
He's come a long way since a terrible car crash in April of 2018 when he was 9 years old. Here, his mother, Elizabeth Flores, describes the extent of Julian's burns.
Mostly his face, scalp, arms, his knees. He also unfortunately lost 9 fingers as a result of the burns.
Julian was in the intensive care units at Los Angeles General Medical Center for more than 2 months. But returning to school was always part of the plan. Here's Dr. Hyde Yenakomshin, plastic and burn surgeon at LA General.
I think it's really important to get kids back to school because for burn injury, what we really want is for everyone to get back to where they were before their injury.
Dr. Yenakomshin is project director for the Southern California Burn Model System. It's one of 4 burn injury model system centers funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. These model system centers conduct research and provide innovative treatments for people with burn injury.
We are really positive because we see these children thrive, but for families who have never experienced this before, it can be really unsettling. And so for us, we just have to constantly remind them, it's going to get better. It's going to be hard, it's going to be challenging. We can't lie to the families about that. But that's why we have a multidisciplinary team, both inpatient and outpatient, that follows them for years.
Many children who experience a burn are able to return to school quickly. Most return 7 to 10 days after their burn injury. But traumatic burns like Julian's require much more time and support, starting with the physical challenges.
As a burn surgeon, when I think about a kid going back to school, my main thing I'm looking at is wound care, how long it takes to dress the burn injuries, how painful it is. If they're on opioid medication, if they're still requiring pain meds, that's something that they probably can't go to school with.
Julian endured months of medical treatment for his wounds and amputations. For a long time, his mother wondered how he could possibly go back to school without the use of his hands.
Some of the fears that I had at that time, early stages of just the thought of him going physically back to school, definitely were just looks from other kids, possible bullying. One of the strongest ones I had were as a result of his hands and missing his fingers. Just the disadvantage of not being able to do some of those things.
When a child goes to school, they need to be able to open a lunchbox or grab a door handle, not to mention writing or finding a page in a book. This is where an occupational therapist can help. Here's Ben Madrid, occupational therapy supervisor at LA General.
We're always looking at analyzing how a child does something. And so if they're not able to hold on to a drumstick, that occupational therapist will look for any sort of way to get them back to doing that activity.
As part of the multidisciplinary team, Julian's occupational therapist would often collaborate with other clinicians, including Maria Elena Tomei. She's what is called a child life specialist, a person who helps children through all the challenges of medical treatment.
I remember very specifically with Julian, he wanted to try to use an iPad. I spoke to Don, who's his OT, and we thought, if he had a stylus, he didn't have complete use of his fingers at that time, and I was able to find a stylus. She was able to actually create something that connected to his fingers. It was like a Velcro, so he was able to actually use the iPad, and he was very successful at it. So it brought some joy to him, but also it gave him that feeling of success. I can do something, and that's very important for children.
As the medical team was working on Julian's physical challenges, his school, Harmony Elementary, was doing their part to try to stay connected with Julian, an important part of his preparations to eventually return to school. His third grade teacher, Cynthia Freire, remembers a voice message his classmates recorded for him.
They had these really sweet messages like, "Hi, Julian, we love you and we want you to get well soon. And, your desk is here and no one's going to sit in that chair."
And even though he was fighting for survival, those messages were a good match for Julian's own mood. Here's his principal at the time, Sylvia Salazar.
When I visited Julian at the hospital, it struck me because although he was all bandaged up, and I had to dress up in scrubs and cover myself, he was more concerned with, am I going to have my position at school in my classroom? He really wanted to come back to school. That's what he asked me. Can I save his space?
Well, the reason I wanted to go back to school is one, just I wanted to see my friends and hang out with them, just see how everyone's doing.
Eventually, one of Julian's closest friends, Mauricio Parra, came for a visit. Julian's mom was nervous.
Also, it was a little bit scary just because his burn injuries were very fresh. He was still wrapped up, so he looked different. And to me and my family, we were okay. We were learning. We were okay with. He was Julian. He was my son. But to others, it can be very shocking, right? So we kind of prepared him. His mom prepared him, and he came to visit us, and it was great interaction. It was just like nothing had ever happened.
That visit with a friend accomplished a lot. Julian got to reconnect with someone from his life before his burn, a reminder to him and his mother of who he was and who he could be again. And they both got to see how other people might respond to Julian's visible burn wounds and scars.
The emotional aspect of scarring really depends a lot also on, are the scars hidden or are they visible? If they're visible, the child has to deal with people looking at him all the time. And so how do they master that? For a very young child, one of the things I might say is, they're curious. They're just wondering what's going on.
And sometimes in school, looks can turn into worse. Here's burn survivor Alexi Piles.
I think a big part of feeling like a burn survivor and having been bullied so much at school, I was like, I just want to be isolated, right? I just want to sit in this misery. I don't care.
A support group of fellow teenage burn survivors helped her immensely.
Showing up I think it was twice a month on a Saturday for 3 hours, and just even sitting there and being amongst others who felt the same way started to not make that feeling feel so heavy anymore.
Alexi remembers the day they decided to show each other their burn scars for the first time.
It was amazing, and it felt like, winning $1 million. going to see the biggest candy store in the world. Like, it was that shock and that excitement to say, like, I showed my scars today.
Going to a support group for young children is so important because children have the opportunity to sit with other children and talk about that and say, yeah, you know, that happens to me too. I hate it when people stare at me. I hate it when everyone's asking me, what happened to you?
For kids like Alexi and Julian, it can be really helpful to come up with a script to repeat whenever someone asks about their burn.
A very simple one that we might rehearse over different times would be, I got burnt in a fire, or I got burnt with hot water. Thank you for asking. And if they want to ask more questions, or maybe they don't feel like answering, it's okay to say, you know, I really don't feel like talking about it right now, but thank you for asking.
Over the years, Julian has found this very useful.
It kind of depends. I can either give them like a super long version or like the super short version. So the super short version, I just say, I was in a car accident, and it went to flames. And the super long version, I just go into my entire life story, which, you know, yeah.
Julian left the hospital and inpatient rehabilitation with a lot of tools that would help him get back to school. But his injuries required time at home. So the school district provided a teacher who would come to his house.
He did the appropriate school plan for him at that time. So it was just the teacher and him, one-on-one, for several hours throughout the week. And I can say that definitely helped me as a mom see it, that he is capable of going back with his peers.
I think there's not one return to school plan. There's no cookie cutter approach. And I remember talking to Elizabeth about that and saying, you know, maybe you can start half a day or a couple of half a days a week and, you know, ease him into it so that he can let you know what he's capable of doing. I remember one of the first times he went, it wasn't for a school day, but I think it was for a Halloween event. I remember her asking me about, should he attend this event? And I said, is he asking to go? Then I think he should go.
The visit went really well, but it would be a few more months until he returned to school full-time. Meanwhile, Principal Sylvia Salazar and her team were working to prepare Harmony Elementary to be ready for Julian.
One of the things that we needed to do was to have an individualized education plan for him, to make sure that we had things in place in terms of supports for nursing, and then for his overall well-being.
Helping the other students at the school learn about burn injuries was a critical element of the back-to-school plan for Julian.
Many children go back to school, and many of their friends have never seen anybody who has a full body burn or a large scar. It can be very scary for the other child, but many times it's just a matter of the child not understanding what's going on.
My burn injury occurred when I was 6, but I was in the hospital for a very long time, and it was terrifying for me to think that I was going to go back. You know, children not only are curious, they can be mean.
Inspired in part by her own experience, Cindy Rudder has provided support to children returning to school after burn for over 35 years, and she would do the same for Julian.
One of the local burn foundations, the Lisanne Rouge Burn Foundation, then notified me that they had Miss Cindy Rudder, who would go around to the schools to provide a form of presentation to the schools about the burn injuries. I was scared, I was nervous.
Elizabeth's anxiety was not surprising, and school staff considering such a program may have concerns too. Dr. Sarah Stoikos is clinical psychologist for the Southern California Burn Model System.
Sometimes there can be some resistance or fear from others about telling kids who weren't in the burn about the burn injury as if it may traumatize them. But really what we find in the literature is that by not talking about this big elephant in the room, it leads to a sense of lack of safety or confusion about, kids sense this thing happened, but what is it? By talking about scary things that they're going to have to confront anyway, that contextualizes it in a frame of resilience and that this scary thing happened and they're okay and they're coming back, gives more agency and power to the kids, to the school community.
Cindy Rudder ended up doing age-appropriate presentations for the entire school so that everyone would be prepared to welcome Julian back. And she spent extra time with Julian's class.
As I showed them the scars on my arms, and I asked them, if they wanted to touch them, and they did. I mean, it was interesting how many of the kids wanted to just come up and touch the scars. And just explaining to them that Julian was going to come back, and his body looked different, but it was still Julian. And I think they were incredibly receptive, and I think that eased his transition.
They wanted to know if he was still okay. And we tried just communicating to them that he's the same person, just his exterior is burned, and that's his skin, and that was it. But it's the same Julian that they played with, that they learned with, that they worked with.
And that also helped as a way to empower me and remove some of those fears because I saw how the other children accepted the information and they were learning and they were actually asking questions. And it gave me some form of, just a comforting feeling and allowed me to realize, okay, this is going to be okay.
The school was ready for Julian to return, and Julian was ready to go back.
The occupational therapist and, kept telling me he's doing great. He was being proactive and he was excited to do the exercises. So at that point, I'm like, if he has that eagerness and determination, then I should feed off of that.
About 11 months after his injury, Julian finally went back to school in March of 2019.
They told me, it's best that you don't stay here. Just drop him off. We'll take care of the rest. And so I did. When I picked him up, I felt okay for the first time in months.
Returning to school is not a one-and-done thing. Every time a child goes to a new school or makes new friends or joins a new class, there are likely to be questions.
And I clearly myself remember my transitions from each grade. So I think that's the other thing, making sure the child is followed through high school. Some kids don't want it. Some kids are, I'm good. You did it for me when I was in the 6th grade. I don't think I need it. And that's awesome. But if they do feel they need it, I think we need to be there for them.
What about something with technology?
Julian decided not to have a structured school reentry program when he started high school this year. While it's not easy, he'd rather be the one to share his story now.
Like my close friends, like for instance, all the people in my band class, most, if not all of them, know what happened to me. Whether it just be them observing, like me, or them mustering up the courage to tell me while not being, quote unquote, trying to be disrespectful towards me, which I don't care, honestly. You can ask all the questions that like it won't offend me in any way. No, thank you, I'm sober.
Okay, so how are we doing here?
His mother did reach out to the school and helped get some support in place. His writing is slow because of the burn injuries to his hands, so he has the option for extra time and speech-to-text software. But the choice is his.
I usually reject accommodations, usually just to fit in. She basically throws all these accommodations to the school, and the school throws them at me, and I reject most of them, but not all of them. For example, like never taking off my headgear or like tiniest bit of extra time on assignments, and I forget the other one, but yeah.
Getting back to school has meant so much for Julian. He's now drumming at big school events, but his mom still worries.
One of the challenges as a parent has been stepping away from advocating for him all the time. Now that he's older, it's his opportunity to communicate what he needs. And it's nerve-wracking as well because you want to make sure your child understands exactly everything they need. But when you see them flourishing, that's usually the time where you're like, okay, It's gonna be okay.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It was so nice to see a smile on his face because he's been through so much, but it brings me joy that he's so resilient and he's able to move on. He's taller than me though.
What I found surprising is these large burns, people with really bad injuries such as amputations, living their life and enjoying life. And as they get older, it's really great to see these patients that we treated years ago blossom.
For kids like Julian, recovering from burn and getting back to school is a long journey, but he's on his way thanks to so many people who care about him. His medical team, the school team, friends, the burn community, and maybe most of all, one loving and fierce advocate.
At times when I'm doing, like for example, homework and she just comes out of nowhere and freaking hugs me, you know, that's what moms do, I can't really stop it, but yeah.
Burn Injury Model System Centers provide coordinated and multidisciplinary care and conduct research to improve care and outcomes for people with burn injury. This video is a product of the Model Systems Knowledge Translation Center in collaboration with the Southern California Burn Model System, funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. To learn more about the work of the Burn Injury Model System Centers, please visit msktc.org.